type of information do you want to track in the report catalog? So thinking about, this sort of builds on each one of these. For a inventory, if you're just inventorying, typically the types of things you have is the name of the report, the location, like a link or some sort of instruction on where this lives or what file it is or what folder it's in, what tool is it coming from, what data system or systems is it pulling from, the domain, if that's something that is discoverable. What we mean by that is like, oh, this is a financial report or an HR report or a student system report or something. Then the technical details, if possible. So typically, if you're bulk importing something from an inventory standpoint, you can get the code for it if it's something that's just a straight up query or a script or something. Or maybe if you, depending on the tool, you can link to where that code lives. Maybe it's in a Git repository somewhere. But the point is, it gives you a point to someone who is looking at this in your report catalog and finds it and says, I want to understand what this thing does. If it's not curated yet, or they're being asked to curate it, they can know, how do I get to the code to understand it? Either the code is brought in with the inventory, or there's a link to or instructions on how to get to the code, so they don't have to go hunting around. Then the next thing is what data. This is slightly more difficult depending on what type of reporting tool, but if you want to understand like some minimum searchable information or details on what's actually on the report. So at the bare minimum, if it's a query, you can sort of identify what the actual labels are, the column labels for what's in that query, and whatever they're named. And oftentimes on a report, you know, if I go back to this, I closed it, but if I go back to that Tableau report, you know, there were some column labels and things on that that Tableau has in their metadata that you can pull in. And again, that doesn't mean that it's explicitly a business glossary definition necessarily. You know, it may even match one-to-one, but you kind of want to have someone validate that thing that is, you know, the AR aging date, or, you know, days overdue or something, is actually the same that matches your definition of that. The other thing you can have that you probably can get pretty good at is a listing of the data model objects. So here, like the columns and tables and things, particularly if you have a query. So some of that's derivable, some of that might just be searchable from sort of free-form text. So if you can bring this stuff in and have either the whole query or parsed elements of this be searchable, and just bulk searches or the actual individual elements, that can really help people with that question of, hey, I'm searching for a report that includes social security number or includes birth date. And if you either got a label or it's something that's in the code, you might be able to find that. The next level then, though, is when you're talking about curating this. So you have all the same information that you can bring in, but now you want to talk about the purpose or this usability rating. I'm going to talk about usability rating for a minute. So this really depends on, you know, how you want to classify things. You can be very simple. Some people just have like certified reports and non-certified reports. And the certified reports are basically stuff that they say, hey, as an organization, if you use this, we're saying that's good. You know, everything else is, you know, at your own risk. But some people have a much more granular breakdown. So they might have anything like a certified report. They might have something that's called like, you know, shared or recommended reports. And then they might have like, you know, ad hoc reports. And then they may have a method of sort of downvoting or tagging reports with issues or inactive or out of date things, which can be really useful too. Now, you have to be somewhat careful about how you implement that process, that you're not causing personnel issues by, you know, letting people complain about other people's reports. But whatever you come up with, the point is saying that you're really identifying for people, you know, who oftentimes have like, you know, 1,000 or plus more reports in a reporting tool, which ones they want to focus on and maybe ultimately start to deprecate and clean up that stuff. The other thing, the big one, like owner we talked about, like who's a developer, if there's context around this, against that's functionally tied. So a lot of these are sort of functional definition things. And so is with the data. So the additional thing here is being able to tie now, as opposed to just sort of the label on the report or the column header or whatever, or the maybe some of the columns in the actual database, to be able to link this to glossary definitions. If you're building a new report, we would say like focus primarily on the glossary definitions, and then the rest kind of falls out from that. Also, maybe more functionally defining the selection criteria. That falls a little bit with context, but being able to say like this is the population selection and what it's trying to do here as well. Then you may also have some instructions here on how to use it. If there's like sort or select options, or there's filter controls or different types of visualizations that people can do, or whatever, like that can be helpful if they're sort of tips or tricks or helpers on the documentation. The other point of curation is these policy attributes. So tagging, like, is this containing certain types of privacy codes or certain types of data retention policies or sharing agreements or confidentiality or whatever it may be. So these are types of information you want to track from a curation standpoint. Again, the big issue, the main big difference here is talking about the purpose, usability, and glossary definitions, as opposed to just the raw information. Lastly is the specification. So if you are, again, this is in our tool, this is all the same document, right? Or the same database entries, essentially, that you're sort of building on. For specification, there might be additional thing that you want to put about this report up front in order for the developer or whoever to agree that these requirements are right and they have all the right information. So, obviously tracking like the timeline needs or, kind of request related things. Why do you need this and when do you need it? It may be a little bit different than the purpose of it. It's more like the immediate kind of request details. You also might decide at this point to kind of document the display or output design or requirements. Usually that's not something that people spend a lot of time looking back and documenting because it exists and you can go look at it. And it's not really important to say, this is a pie chart, because you can sort of see it as a pie chart. But if someone's going to build it, it's important to maybe design that. You can do mock-ups or whatever, and other kind of requirements. And lastly, there's sort of a sign-off and review and conversation back and forth is something you can track. So having the ability to say, oh, I was the one who requested this, and yes, this looks fine, and then I've tested it and it looks great. So just tracking this as sort of attributes of the request and getting all the whatever information I need to get to the right person. So that's a set of information you want to have in your catalog tools like the cookbook. We've got these fields baked in, and you can add other custom fields that you want.